Have you noticed that the closer that you've gotten to power, the less you're able to be yourself? Be honest. Ask yourself. You might be calling it strategy, but really it's submission. It's you quieting yourself, shutting yourself down so that you can stay in this position, in this proximity. Well, if that's the case, I want to talk to you today about Mary McLeod Bethune's strategy for power, how she was able to get close to the White House without being owned by it, and what that means for you and what that means for me today in 2026. My name is Thais Kajumbo, and this is the next video in my series on the First Ladies, which is the story of the friendship between Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt. This book is written by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. Proximity without submission. How do we do that? How did she do that? In 1936, Mrs. Bethune became the highest ranking black woman in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration. But she didn't arrive there empty handed. She didn't arrive there looking for a handout. She had already built her college. She had already founded national organizations. She'd already established herself as the expert. So by this point, the White House needed her more than she needed them. Or at least it was a mutually beneficial relationship. They both had opportunities that they could leverage from each other. It wasn't just that she needed the White House. She was already accomplished. She'd already made immense gains for the black community up to this point. So our goal overall is to build a base of power of our own before we go close to somebody else's. The way that Mrs. Bethune was able to do this was because she first knew her purpose. Before she built institutional power or before she positioned herself strategically, she had to answer one question. What is it that I'm here to do? And for her, that was to uplift the black community through education and empowerment. And that purpose never changed. How she did it evolved over the years. In 1904, she built her first school. In 1935, she founded national organizations. In 1936, she took on a federal role. In the 40s, she began advising presidents. But the what it was, her purpose, stayed fixed. I want to read a couple of passages from the book to show the different ways that purpose can be discovered. Sometimes purpose seems like a big kind of ethereal word or something that's kind of heady, and maybe it's hard to pinpoint. Or in this time when people are having real crises because maybe you've been laid off, or maybe you're impacted by all these crazy things that the government is doing right now. And thinking about purpose might seem like something you don't really have time to do. But I want you to take just a few moments and think about it, because understanding that may make it easier for you to take your next steps. So purpose can be spoken into you. So I want to share a passage from the book on how her purpose was spoken into her. My grandmother, who had been kidnapped in Africa and brought to America, believed I had a special destiny before I was born. It's a special gift coming, she told my parents every day during my mother's pregnancy. Everyone assumed Grandma Sophie was talking about the fact that I was my parents' 15th child, the first born free. But then I came into the world with a veil over my face, the significance of which Mama and Grandma Sophie explained to me when I was 5. The veil, the thin piece of skin that kept me safe inside Mama's belly, didn't disappear upon my birth, was a sign that God had a special plan for my life. Grandma Sophie explained it best. You may not be much to look at, Mary Jane, but that's not what's important. That veil makes you special. You're beautiful because God made you in His image. You were born with a purpose. So from the very beginning, her family knew that she had a special purpose here on this earth. Whether they could articulate it exactly, nobody knows exactly what we're going to do except God. But her family knew that she had a purpose, and that was spoken into her from her earliest days. So your purpose can be spoken into you. So consider things that people have said about you, positive things that people have said about you, about your character, about who you are, or maybe ask people that are closest to you and who have known you for a long time. Your purpose can be found in connection with others, when you're moving together with others. I'm going to share a passage about Eleanor Roosevelt. She pulled on the arm of a taller woman standing nearby and brought her into our conversation. May I introduce you to my dear friend, Miss Marion Dickerman? She spends most of her time teaching young women at the Todd Hunter School. With her narrow face and her dark hair severely parted down the center, I expected a dour expression. But instead, Marian beamed at me. For the next half hour, and then in our conversations that followed, I didn't have to make painful, empty small talk. I didn't have to pretend at levity to hide my otherwise unacceptable, serious nature. Within weeks, as we traversed New York to try to recruit women for the Democratic Party, Nan, Marian, and I formed a circle of our own. They introduced me to a life of purpose I hadn't known existed. So sometimes when you get connected with others, when you're moving with people, when you're working on things together, your own purpose can be revealed to you. Purpose can be found through life circumstances. So this is a passage about Mrs. Bethune. She had been in a store, like a clothing store, and she had an encounter with a white woman. Mrs. Wallace continues, but in spite of it being different, we did have a good time. We'll be on the lookout for some of your other programs, and perhaps we'll return. By different, I'm sure she means she never expected to be sitting in an auditorium shoulder to shoulder with Negroes. Unlike at other venues, including other colored colleges, I don't allow segregated seating at my school. When I call my gathering a community meeting, I mean that. Everyone from the community is treated the same. Mrs. Wallace continues, but in spite of it being different, we did have a good time. We'll be on the lookout for some of your other programs, and perhaps we'll return. Just as she finishes, Miss Esther joins us and hands a shopping bag to Mrs. Wallace. With a broad smile, Mrs. Wallace says, well, it was nice meeting you, Mary. I flinch, then paste the smile back onto my face and tell Mrs. Wallace, Mrs. Bethune is fine. She blinks. What? She asks as if she hasn't understood the English I've just spoken. You called me Mary, I say, staring into her shocked blue eyes. My name is Mrs. Bethune. Her smile fades and her lips press together, forming a straight line. Without another word to me or Esther, she spins and marches to the exit. The bell above the door jingles as she stomps away. I watch her for only a moment and then turn back to the addresses on the rack. Oh, Mrs. Bethune. Miss Esther giggles so hard her face turns red, but I don't chuckle with her. As a child, I heard white children disrespect my parents, calling them Sam and Patsy. My parents never had a single day of honor, were never addressed as Mr. or Mrs. McLeod, and I declared back then that would change with me. Every white person I met would call me Miss McLeod, and if I ever got married, then I demand they call me by my married name. So the circumstances of her parents never having been respected, never having had their names called properly as other people would have, as white people would have, she determined for herself that she would be addressed properly. And so sometimes our purpose, our drive is kind of handed to us by the circumstances of life. And then it can also be passed down. I'm going to read one more passage. She's talking to her grandson. Yes, baby. Do white people think colored people are dirty? Now I'm the one fighting back tears. I roll my shoulders back and lift my head high. It's my duty to give him the truth so he'll stand tall in the face of the lies he'll be told about his race. Albert, you are neither that name those men called you, nor are you dirty. But let me tell you who you are. You come from a long line of royalty. Royal blood flows through your veins. At first, Albert just stares. Then he says, royalty like kings and queens? Exactly like kings and queens. This comes from my grandmother herself, who is your great-great-grandmother. She was a queen? Albert asks. Grandma Sophie was a princess, I say. She would have been a queen had she not been stolen from Africa and forced to come to this country where she was made to work in the rice fields. Oh, he says, like he has some understanding. Was she a slave? I wish I could tell my grandson that, no, my grandmother was not a slave, that none of the Africans who were stolen from their homeland were slaves. They were teachers and doctors and lawyers and scientists. But he needs the truth. She was a slave when she came to this country, but she never forgot who she was raised to be. Your great-great-grandmother, the princess, was a stately woman who was well-spoken, disciplined, diligent, and strong. Even though she was taken away from her home in shackles, she always remembered the days when she wore ivory around her neck, gold on her wrists, and fancy embroidered gowns. She remembered that she was a princess and not a slave. So she was able to, because she understood her family legacy, she was able to embody that for herself And then she was able to pass that on to her son and her grandsons. So if you are struggling with your purpose, I want you to consider that you can ask the people around you, think about what they have spoken into you. You can find your purpose in the work that you're doing with other people. You can find your purpose through the circumstances that you have experienced, and it can also be passed down to you. Now I want you to ask yourself these questions. What am I here to do? Who am I here to serve? And what am I trying to create? Those questions can help lead you towards your purpose, and then that becomes your North Star. Now let's look at the pattern that Mrs. Bethune left for us for power. Now let's look at the pattern for power that Mrs. Bethune left for us. The first step is to build institutional power first. So she didn't wait for permission or proximity to build. She was filled with her purpose. She knew what she had to do. So she founded the Bethune-Cookman College with just $1.50 when she learned that there was an opportunity, that there was no school for Black children in this area in Daytona, and they were looking for somebody. She went there to become that somebody. She created the National Council of Negro Women. She led all these different organizations. She created new organizations. She bought buildings. She bought businesses. She bought insurance companies. All of these things she did because they needed to be done. It wasn't like she was trying to become this business tycoon. She was doing what needed to be done for her people. So she didn't have to wait for anybody to do anything for her because she took it upon herself. When she was preparing to found her school, she sold sweet potato pies. She made and sold sweet potato pies. She hustled. She did what she needed to do in order to begin achieving her goals. So what does that mean for us? Your next move, my next move, is to stop waiting for the right company or the right title or the right connection to validate you and build something that is your own. And I understand this completely. I understand the safety and security that comes with having the title, having the company, having those connections, because I did that. I climbed the corporate ladder. I got to be a senior director in a global, like 50,000, 60,000 person financial technology company. In that company and in other companies in corporate America, there are very few executives. There are very few people at those levels, at director and up. And so that gave me, a sense of pride, a sense of security until it didn't, until it got to be too much, until I had to make a tough decision and say, you know what, this is not for me anymore. And when I stepped away, I recognized that I had done a fantastic job of building up my network within the company, but I hadn't spent enough time building up my network outside. I did when I was younger, but when I got into that company, I got comfortable. I stayed there for several years and I began to build in there. So when I step away, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of leaving what I built, but I know that I have built other things outside of that. So it's just a matter of remembering what I have already built, what already belongs to me. I have a body of work. I have written things outside of the company. I have spoken outside of the company. I have definitely taught outside of the company. And I'm sure you have too. You have some kind of body of work that shows what you're capable of outside of the company or companies that you've been in. And if you don't, begin building it. There's nothing stopping you right now from building your own body of work. You have access, you have the tools that you need to begin blogging, to begin vlogging, to create a portfolio, to put together a course. Even if nobody comes, you can still sit in front of the camera and deliver your material. And that way, if anybody wants to see what you're capable of, you have something to show. You have something in your hand to show. You can also build your network. That's the people that you have met and who you have connected with. You don't have to just stay connected to the people that are within the company that you are a part of or that you were a part of. This world is wide and there are so many people in your own local neighborhood, in your own town, that are willing to connect with you and want to see you succeed and are willing to help you. It's just a matter of putting yourself out there and connecting. There are events on meetup.com, on LinkedIn, on Facebook events. There are are all kinds of events. And if money is an issue, there are all kinds of free events. At the end of December, I was determined that I was going to get outside. I had a coffee chat with a woman. I went to a networking meeting about women in government contracting. I went to a mixer at a Black-owned group co-working space. So there are, and all of those were free things to do. So you can begin to build your own network outside of a company. And then the expertise that you have, document it, make it visible. Like I said, create a portfolio, create a body of written work, create a video portfolio to show what you know and what you're capable of. And then when you have your own foundation, you are negotiating from a position of strength, not a position of need. And that's what Mrs. Bethune was able to do. I'm going to share a couple of passages. She had been, at the very beginning of the book, it starts with her being invited by Mrs. Sarah Roosevelt to her home with other women in the United States. She said, Mary said, "If I didn't know this was a luncheon for women leaders of national clubs and organizations, some of the most powerful women in America, I'd think I'd stepped into a fashion show." So because Mary had already been a leader of a national club and organization, she was invited. She was offered a seat at the table. She didn't have to go begging for that seat. And then when she spoke with Mrs. Roosevelt says, "Please tell me, I understand you've just returned from Europe. How was your trip?" "It was the most glorious 8 weeks. Isn't Europe amazing? So full of history." Leaning closer, she whispers, "Did I hear you had an audience with the Pope?" The astonishment in her tone matches the amazement I felt standing before Pope Pius XI and receiving his blessing. As we talk about the Vatican, I wonder how news of my travels spread so fast and so wide. So again, she has been well traveled already. She's met the Pope. She's done all these things. So when she enters this room, she doesn't need to feel out of sorts or feel like she's an imposter because she has already established her platform. So once you are establishing your platform, you've built your institutional knowledge, then you position yourself as the solution. So like I said, Mrs. Bethune wasn't begging for a seat at the table. She was working. So when the Roosevelt administration needed advice on how to serve Black Americans, she was the obvious choice. She was the most famous Black woman in the United States, most powerful Black woman in the United States at this time. She made herself necessary. I'm going to read a couple of passages from the text. Eleanor managed to make the impossible happen. While we were focused on getting colored men into federal positions, she secured this federal role for me, behind the scenes anyway. It was an idea that came to Eleanor when she was unable to attend the NAACP convention. She sent the influential Miss Josephine Roche in her stead. Eleanor knew that as the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury and co-chair of the National Youth Administration's Executive Committee, Ms. Roche would be an important ally. Sure enough, after hearing my speech, Miss Roche returned to the White House with a glowing review. And when Eleanor suggested that I be considered for a position with the NYA, Miss Roche agreed and recommended me to the chair of the executive committee. How excited I was to receive the call. The National Youth Administration is forming an advisory council, and as one of the members, I'll have input into federal programs that specifically focus on colored youth. I'll be part of a team that ensures New Deal monies are being directed into Negro communities, and today is our first meeting. So she positioned herself already from her speech. She was able to speak influentially because she had already done so much work. So she made herself an obvious solution to the challenges that they were having or to the goals that they were trying to accomplish. And then she got the opportunity to speak to the president directly. And Franklin Roosevelt is talking to his wife, Eleanor. Mrs. Bethune made a most impressive and persuasive speech during the NYA meeting. She is an excellent speaker, I say warily. Toward the end of the presentation, she talked about the impact the NYA has made and could make in the lives of colored youth. She explained that in order to ensure that Negroes are being properly served, we need to have colored people more actively involved in running the programs. He pauses, and I hold my breath. This notion is one of the central tenets of our plan, but I didn't anticipate that Mary would raise it so plainly and so early. The opportunity must have been perfect. Her argument in favor of colored folks helping manage New Deal plans got me thinking. What if we created a division within the NYA that specifically addressed the needs of our Negro citizens, a department unto itself? Is Franklin suggesting what I think he is? If so, he's exceeding our highest hopes. With great care, I say slowly, I think that's a fine idea, Franklin. He nods and then continues. What if that office was run by a colored person? My heart is pounding so hard that I am certain he can hear it. If Franklin moves forward with this idea, it would place a colored person in a very senior role in federal government. In an overabundance of caution, I nodded, saying, that makes perfect sense. I'm pleased to hear that, Eleanor, he says, and his tone is ebullient. We find ourselves at odds frequently enough that I'm sure he is both relieved and tickled to present this decision to me. And I think you'll be very happy with who I have in mind. Who is that? I ask, not daring to hope. I'd like to appoint Mrs. Bethune to the role. So she was the solution. She was the go-to person. So in order for us to use this pattern, our next move, your next move, is to identify where your expertise solves a problem that others can't. Ask yourself these questions. What do you know that's valuable to people with power and resources? Where are you the expert in the room? What problem can you solve that no one else is solving? And then you make sure that the right people know that you can solve it. I don't want you to overthink this and feel like the problems that you can solve are too small. It's kind of hard to read about somebody as important and as incredible and as accomplished as Mary McLeod Bethune, and then look at yourself and say, well, I'm just, feeding hungry people, or I'm just, whatever it is that you do. Because whatever it is that you are purposed to do is necessary here. You have been given that specific purpose and those specific skills for a reason. So don't sell yourself short. Step 3, use their platform for your agenda. So Bethune didn't become the acceptable Negro who stayed quiet in her position. She used her access to funnel New Deal resources to Black communities, to advocate for anti-lynching legislation, and to build the Black cabinet of advisors. She borrowed their leverage, the federal government's leverage, to advance her mission. Like we said in the beginning, her purpose, her mission, her what, her why didn't change. I'm going to read some passages. So shortly after she was appointed to this position in the federal government, she called a meeting with some of the prominent Black men of the time. And they're meeting now. Bill continues, before we begin, we'd be remiss if we didn't officially congratulate you on your appointment by President Roosevelt as director of NYA's newly formed Division of Negro Affairs. He begins to clap, and the others stand in an ovation. I appreciate this moment because after I got the call, I went straight to work, setting up my office, hiring personnel, meeting the heads of state and federal agencies. I've taken no time to appreciate that I am a close advisor to President Roosevelt. Thank you so much for your recognition, I say as the men settle again into their seats. But this evening isn't about me. I asked you all here, gentlemen, because for the first time since Reconstruction, Negroes have an opportunity to have a real voice in our government's policy. Each one of us is in the position to have the president's ear, and there is power in that. I pause, seeing the glances between Eugene and Robert, then continue. But our power will be even greater if we band together. Can you imagine working in unison? What if we not only kept one another apprised of what was happening in our divisions, but we spoke as one body and advocated with one voice? If we did that, we would be the most powerful group of Negroes ever in the government. So she immediately called her people together. It's like, hey, I'm in. I'm in here. And in fact, in another book that I'm reading about her, this A Passionate Mind and Relentless Pursuit, The Vision of Mary McLeod Bethune by Newlyway Rooks. This is a nonfiction book, and there was I can't find the passage now, but there was a quote that she said where another woman said that we know that if Miss Bethune can just get her foot in the door, and she's going to stand in the doorway and hold it wide open so more Black women can come behind her. And that's what she did. She used her platform for her own agenda. Once she got her foot in the door, she figured out how she could open it up as wide as possible and bring other Black people with her. So what's your next move? to copy this pattern. When you're in rooms with power, corporate jobs, boards, or networks, ask yourself, are you using the platform to build toward your own goals, or are you just performing for the approval of the people who you're around? Are you just performing to get the approval of the other people in that corporate job? Are you just performing for the other people who are sitting on that board, or for the network that you're a part of? Or are you actually using that platform to build towards your own goals? This again goes back to that purpose. When you know what your purpose is, then you can see how you can leverage each opportunity towards that purpose. There's a clip going viral right now of Cheryl Lee Ralph talking about how she reframes every situation she's in, that everything always works out for her. And so if you take this attitude, that thought process with you in whatever room you're in, everything is always working out for me, then it will be easier for you to see how you can leverage that to your advantage. Now, I'm not talking about like using and abusing or not adding value. She added value everywhere she went. She was in the room because she added value. She just also used that for her to accomplish her goal. So she was adding value, but she was also keeping her bigger purpose in mind. So from the scenarios that you're in, from the situations that you're in, the rooms that you have access to, what skills and training can you extract from that? What network and connections can you extract? What credibility and visibility does that give you that you can leverage for your greater purpose? The risk is that you're letting that proximity become your identity, such that if you no longer have that proximity, then you don't know who you are anymore. And that can't happen. And I know hundreds of thousands of us were let go or got out of the workforce for one reason or another, but that should not send us into a tailspin and we no longer know who we are. And I know that for some people, that's easier said than done. And if it is, we need to follow these steps, follow this pattern that Mrs. Bethune laid out for us so that we know exactly who we are. So no matter what happens around us, what these jobs say, we know exactly who we are and what we need to do. The pattern has already been laid out. She has left a blueprint for us to follow. Number 4, maintain your autonomy. Mrs. Bethune never let her government role define her. She kept her college, even though she was advising the presidents. She kept her college independent from the government. Her organizations were a separate power base. Her voice, she didn't soften it to fit into their mold. When people called her out of her name, like I showed that passage earlier, Mrs. Bethune, you can call me Mrs. Bethune. She didn't hesitate to tell Sarah Roosevelt that. She didn't hesitate to tell Mrs. Wallace that. She didn't hesitate to tell anybody that. Mrs. Bethune is my name. She stayed who she was through everything. If the government role had disappeared, then she would still be powerful because she was powerful before that government role ever came. I'm going to give another example of this. I'm going to go to the text to show an example. So if you think back to what I shared about her conversation with Mr. Roosevelt, right after she finished, she thought about, this was her thought process. No one speaks when I finish. I ask myself, did I just lecture the president? Did I just tap on his desk like a teacher making a point of emphasis? Oh, Lord. President Roosevelt, I apologize. I got carried away I blurt out. The president holds up his hand to stop me, but he has to blink a couple of times before he speaks. Mrs. Bethune, please don't apologize. I thank you for your words, and you're right. We must provide as much aid as we can to our Negro youth, especially those living in dire conditions. He pauses and covers my hand with his. His blue eyes glisten. I promise you, I will do whatever I can to help your people. So she stood 10 toes down with the president. and it made a difference because of all that she had already accomplished. She wasn't just going in there arrogant or overconfident. She had already built up a body of work. She had already done so many things and added so much value to her community and to the nation that when she got the chance to hold a conversation with the president, she was able to stand in her power and not shrink down. And so when we are in those positions, we have that same ability too. Your next move is to never make one source of power your only source. Build multiple streams. I know you hear multiple streams of income, but it doesn't necessarily have to be multiple streams of income. You don't have to have a bunch of side hustles. You can have a side hustle so that you know that if your main job ends, you have something else to fall back on. But a stream can also be the network that you've collected, the network that you have built outside of your company connections, such that if you got laid off, you could say, "Hey, Bill, how's it going? It's been a couple of months since we spoke, but you've had that relationship, you've been keeping it warm, so you can say, hey, I'm in the hunt for my next opportunity." And then you don't have to feel so devastated when something happens. You have your skills and your expertise that travel with you. You've got your body of work, you've got your platform, you've got your connections. So if you got fired or laid off, you still know who you are. These are the moves that Mrs. Bethune laid out. This is the real pattern that she showed us. Proximity without submission, getting close to power without losing yourself, means building your own power first, making yourself necessary, borrowing their platform for your agenda, and never letting proximity replace your autonomy. Mary McLeod Bethune was able to do this in the 1930s with $1.50 and the Jim Crow laws. So what is it that you can do right now in 2026 with everything that you've already built? Or what are you going to build right now while you have the opportunity? Or what if you haven't built anything? There's no time like the present. There's a saying that says the best time to do something was like 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. So start right now. Start building your power. Start building your platform. Start building your table. The other thing that is an aside from here, an aside is to build in community. Mary McLeod Bethune didn't do anything by herself. She used the power of influence to get people to help her along the way, whether that was donating money, partnering with her, helping her build, using their platform. She did things in connection with others. So don't feel like you have to do this by yourself. Okay, you are not alone in this. So I want you to save this video, come back to it if you need the reminder. I want you to like, subscribe, and share so you can get more frameworks from Black women who have built power through constraints. And if you want to go deeper on these patterns, I'm breaking all of this down. I'm breaking Bethune's full playbook down in a live workshop on February 18th. The link is in the description and the comments. You do not want to miss this, okay? I'm giving you the whole playbook in depth, and it's an interactive workshop, so you're going to have the opportunity to answer your own questions in real time. And then afterwards, I'm going to give you a GPT that you can use to help you really suss out these things for yourself, because sometimes you can get stuck in this pattern in your mind and you start spinning out. So I'm going to give you all the tools that you need to get yourself started. All right, I'll see you on February 18th.